Right, I wanted to do something like this mainly because Dave Lane did it, and I thought it was just a really good concept about you know, talking about things that have happened in the past and stuff like that, and he seemed to have quite a bit of sort of feedback on that, and you know, if you want to call this a direct rip-off of what Dave's doing, then fair enough, like, do you know what I mean? But I just thought that, like, maybe sort of different stories from different people would sort of go down as well as what his have been doing. And myself personally, I mean, Dave's been in the game for a long time, and you know, and I've been sort of fishing since 1979 myself, 1980 maybe, early 80s, and I always sort of fished for myself. I mean, I didn't fish for different companies and stuff like that, because I didn't really want to be in the limelight. I didn't want to write books or anything like that. And it's only really over the last 10 years, 12 years, yes, yeah, since I was 40, so I'm 53 now. But yes, the last 12, 13 years that I've sort of embraced the fact that media can be a good thing as well as a bad thing. Like, do you know what I mean? With everything going on with this coronavirus, I sort of have found that there's a lot of people with self-righteous views, whether that be good or bad. I mean, it's their own point of view. I mean, I can fully understand that, like, do you know what I mean? But I just thought that, you know, going to why I initially wanted to do this is basically just give you a few stories about my own personal fishing throughout the years. I wasn't really interested in going sort of like to far away lakes and stuff like that, and I didn't really start driving until I was you know, sort of 37, 38. So so for me it was always local fishing, either on my bike or having lifts off people and stuff like that, which suited me. I mean, I was quite happy doing that. I mean, like most of the people in you know, in my particular area, they weren't really interested in sort of like going far afield and stuff like that. I mean, I had some good trips, you know what I mean, you know, to other lakes, you know, like Farlows and stuff like that, when my mates would go in there, and I can remember one trip I'd gone to Farlows with a good friend of mine, Simon Goff, and we were supposed to be there for about 3 or 4 days, and it turned into a week, and I phoned up work and basically lied and sort of said that my mate's car had broken down, can't come into work, and his car's in a garage, and it was going to take 2 or 3 days for that to be fixed. And yeah, that was interesting. But it you know, and that was the early days when I think Boa Leisure had it, and where they had the pub on the point as well, which was quite sort of interesting to see people sprint into their rods fishing off the point from the pub. But you know, but that was a done thing back, you know, like Lady was saying, you know, a lot of things that happened in sort of like the 80s and the 90s was acceptable behaviour. I mean, it wasn't about what can we say, where you've got the mat police at the moment. Oh, I'm going to mat underneath there. Well, we didn't really have that, like, do you know what I mean? You know, a bit of soft grass was all we needed back in the day, like, do you know, it wasn't about sort of like, oh, you know, we had a mat, because they weren't even around then, like, do you know what I mean? You know, where you had anglers, sort of like, we had a local water by us, and there was 2 anglers on there, very good anglers back in the day, and they were absolutely ripping the lakes apart. And this was like early 80s, and obviously they'd been were the first ones in our area to start using the hair rig, like, do you know what I mean? And I was, you know, little did we know that was what they were using, and they absolutely annihilated all the lakes around our area until we cottoned on to what they were doing, and then obviously we were all in the same boat then, like, do you know what I mean? You know, so for me, the biggest sort of step in fishing is definitely the herring. I mean, you know, it absolutely turned carp fishing on its head. I mean, younger people won't realise that. I mean, you know, they sort of say, oh yeah, we've got, you know, there's a new rig come out and it's caught loads of fish for particular anglers and whatever. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, you know, they might give you like an extra 1% in your fishing, and I always work on percentages in my own fishing anyway, but the hair rig was not, your fishing had gone from 10% to 100% overnight. It was just unreal. It was literally tearing waters apart, not just in the area I was fishing, South Wales, but for the whole of Britain. I mean, it was just literally overnight near enough, you know, you know, for the select few initially, but it was like literally, you know, it was the thing to be on, like, you know. But you know, so just giving you a little bit of background of where my fishing's come from, like, do you know what I mean? And to like come into sort of 10, 12 years ago, I mean, I was fishing, you know, I was going further afield then because I was driving, and I was absolutely loving my life then, you know, fresh behind the wheels and stuff like that. Absolutely fantastic, like, you know, for myself. I started going onto the water park. Yeah, so I started fishing the water park, and it was totally different type of waters that I was used to fishing, but, you know, sort of locally, where you know, it were weedy waters and it were clear waters. I mean, you know, I don't know whether any of you know the Cotswold Water Park, but I mean, that's the type of waters. They were gravel pits. I mean, there's hundreds around in that particular area, and there was a lot of gravel workings around there. When I first started fishing on there, which was sort of like I said, 12 years ago, I mean, all of the gravel workings had been finished then, like, do you know what I mean? And they were all mature lakes by then. But there were so many lakes to choose from, and I was sort of like, you know, myself and a friend of mine, Gareth, we bought you know, as many tickets as we could buy, because we just wanted to sort of try all the different lakes, and we did sort of like a session basically on all the waters that were available on these club tickets, like, do you know what I mean, like Ashton Keynes and South Cerney, and yeah, I mean, we had some great times, met some really good mates along the way, and you know, until eventually I ended up on Naybridge, like, you know, and Naybridge for me was an absolute headbanger of a water, if I'm being honest. It wasn't the easiest. It was, I mean, I called it sort of like a little car park. I mean, like the car park in Italy. I mean, it was a tough water. I mean, I think there was only 25, 30 fish in there, and just having a couple of fish a season was really good going. And I'd done, it sort of kept on kicking me all the time. I mean, very first fish I hooked on was the big common, and it had picked up my other line, and where I was bringing in that line, I was dragging it off a spot into weed, because it was an extremely weedy water at that particular time, and literally I had this carp floundering in front of me, sort of like 5-6 rod lengths out, but it was just too deep for me to even go out and swim and try and get it off or whatever, and it came off in the end anyway. So I was really gutted by that. So that was like my first fish. That was like a 40-pound common, so it sort of does, do you know what I mean? So I was really gutted about that, but it's all part of the learning experience and stuff, like, do you know what I mean? And there was I don't know where, you know, how sort of like with your own fish and with your own legs and stuff like that, you'll always find that little bit of a click that, like, you know, you're into or you're not into, do you know what I mean? And on this particular water, it was mainly sort of like between sort of like two bait companies at the time, which was like Connect Bait and boss baits. That's right, boss baits. And you sort of like you're in the one camp or the other. I mean, you know, and you tend to find that those anglers tend to just sort of stay with each other, even though we still talk to each other, you know, and stuff. You know, whenever there was captures, then the ones from the relevant bait company would turn up to do the photographs and stuff like that. But because I was doing so much time on that particular lake, and I was using connect baits at the time. No, I was just sort of flitting around with different baits, but then a really good mate of mine, Vinny, he sort of like said, look, you know, get on connect baits and stuff like that, and I tried them out. In the very first session I tried them out, I had 2 fish. Literally, you know, and it just blew me away with catching fish, you know, so straight away on a new bait. It was just, yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. I was absolutely made up with catching those 2 fish, especially as I'd been having my butt kicked for the 6 months previously type of thing. And there was loads of stories. I mean, I you know, there was one story where I was fishing on a bridge, and they were literally boshing out all over the place. My mate had come down, Vinny, and I told him, I said, look, you know, there's quite a few fish in this middle section by here. You know, I'm fishing on one side, go over to the other side, which was the party swim. So he dived in there, and literally there was a fish that was constantly showing over the one spot, and I was shouting over to him, look, no, a little bit further and a little bit to the right, that's where because it was literally of the same spot all the time. But anyway, to cut a long story short, later that night he caught the fish called the male, I think it was called, like 40, mid 40. I don't know the pounds and ounces exactly, but yeah, which is a little bit of a story in itself, because like I'd had the phone call, I've got a fish, like, do you know what I mean? But can you bring round a set of pliers? And I was like, oh really? So anyway, I reeled my rods in quick, ran around, we had this fish on the bank, and when it had kicked, the hook had gone through the lip of the carp, and the hook had gone into his finger. So there's this fish was thrashing around, it was just smashing this hook into his finger. And so I grabbed a pair of scissors and cut the hook length off, because it was before we had, you know, he didn't have like a quick links and stuff like that. And it was, you know, so I cut the hook length off, and then yeah, so we got it off his finger and stuff, and yeah, he was he did. Yeah, I almost felt the pain myself. But anyway, yeah, we did the usual. We sort of like, you know, it was near enough light, so we thought, right, okay, well, we'll put that in the sack. We weren't using retainers then, and we put it in the sack, and did the photographs first thing in the morning. As soon as it got light, the photographs were there. Neil came down from Connect Baits. He was loving life, you know, and yeah, and that was great. But the only thing that I found was that there was a lot of fish showing. I wasn't getting no bites. When I reeled in to go around to my mate's plate, I was using stiff hinge rigs, and it was the first time I'd ever used them, and they were both hooked up on the leg core, and I could not believe it. And I was having loads of liners, and I was absolutely devastated that, you know, they were both hooked up, like, you know. So that was like the first and last time I've ever used a stiff hinge rig, but it's down to personal preference. I mean, because that had happened to me once, I didn't want it to happen to me again, you know. So, you know, it's you know, and it's a confidence thing. I mean, if I tend to do that. If something doesn't work once, then I won't use it again. Do you know what I mean? I don't swap and change for no reason. You probably noticed this moving around a little, but I just, for some no reason, my card was full up, so I was having to, I had to do a little section, then upload them, and then do another little session, upload them. So I've deleted quite a bit now, so hopefully it should be okay now. But anyway, going back to that story with yeah, so it was with the stiff hinge rigs. I wasn't particularly happy about it, and yeah, it is one of those confidence things. So anyway, I just thought, right, that's it. I'm never going to use them again. So yeah, going back to back then now to when I first started using connect baits, literally within sort of like there was a wind going right over the top of me, and they were showing at range, and this guy that was fishing the party swim, there's a big band of weed there, and he was his baby was fishing, his brolly was fishing away from the lake, and and they were showing the other side of this weed bed, and I know when I was seeing him cast now, he was casting to the near side of the weed bed, because it was just a really like really thick weed. It's not Canadian, it's like this. It's like branches coming through the water, and then I'd never seen anything like it before, and it was really like rough stuff, like, and it would cut you off. I mean, it was just unreal stuff. But anyway, I knew he wasn't fishing past that, and these fish were showing just the other side of it. And from where I was fishing, it was a good chuck, but because I had the wind behind me, and then my mate came down and sort of like, wow, look at all those fish, and I said, yeah, you know, but it's not in my swim and whatever. And then he just lobbed one out, innit? So I just like, yeah, so I waded out a bit, whacked him out, and the first fish, literally, I put the bobbin on, and it whipped off in my hand, and I thought, wow, here we go. Played this fish in, and the first fish was so I did 28 and a half pound mirror. But for me, I just won the gold medal. I mean, I've just like the first fish out of there, and it was a fish called the Pretty One, which is, by all accounts, it hadn't been out for a long time. So I was, and it was an amazing fish. I mean, it was called the Pretty One for a reason. I mean, I'll put a poster pic up now in a minute. And then, yeah, basically then, I thought, right, this is brilliant. Reeled in, you know, obviously I put the same rod back out again, and literally as I was in the water to cast now, this fish just borshed right out. And as I was casting out, and I literally, like, you know, even if I'd have placed it there myself, your hand placed it, it landed right in the rings. Felt it down, boom, oh, lovely jubbly. And I knew there was no weed in that bit there anyway, do you know what I mean? So boom, oh, lovely jubbly. And as because I'm out now about sort of 10-15 yards out in the water, because I, you know, to cast a little bit further, and as I'm walking back, it's ripped off my hand. I couldn't believe it. I was like, whoa. So anyway, playing this fish, brings it in, and I'm not quite sure about, because most of the fish had, or all of the fish had names in it near enough, and I'm not quite sure whether it was called the baby male. It was a smaller version of the one my mate had caught, and it was absolutely stunning. Yeah, so that was like £32. Absolutely made up now, totally made up. I'm sat down there with my mate. He was there doing all the photographs, and then I thought, bro, this is brilliant, like, do you know what I mean? And then I had a phone call that day to say that my ticket had come up on Farriers, and I was sort of like, I was really stuck, because I thought, look, not that I'd unlocked the code on Naybridge, but there was sort of unfinished business on there, but also on the other hand, I'd caught from there. So it wasn't like as if, you know, I'd left the lake with my tail between my legs and caught nothing. And tickets like Farriers don't come up all the time, like, do you know what I mean? There's big waiting lists and stuff like that. So I thought, yeah, I got to take the ticket. So, yeah, so, and literally it was because someone had dropped out, and I was next on the list, and it was literally only like a week, I think it was like a week or maybe 2 weeks before the season started. So like literally when I finished that session, which was that day anyway, I shot off, and I was getting all my gear ready then to fish Farriers, because I don't know whether you know, it's a barbless only, there's no leaders or anything like that. So I had to sort of like, and I was fishing braid as well at this particular time, and they don't allow braid on Cab Society waters. So everything had to be sort of like really, I had to strip it all back. So I needed like a week or two just to get everything that I needed for my campaign to start on Farriers, like, you know. So So I took a self-imposed couple of weeks off just to sort stuff out, get everything ready to fish Farriers. Yeah, so I started on. I went on Farriers. Oh, it was just an amazing water. Another super duper weedy water. I mean, literally weeds up to the surface. But it didn't put me off. I'd already fished in Abridge then, and that was a weedy water. Maybe not quite as weedy, but it was still fairly weedy. So it didn't really sort of like bother me that much. So I like you do when you first go on the water, I took a little lap around the lake, and I just bumped into a couple of the members that were fishing on it at that particular time, and one guy was Robo. He was fishing in a swim 13, and he'd had a couple, and I thought, right, well, that's a good start. He's packing up now. Well, I think I'll just get my gear, brought it around, and as when I come back around, all his gear is packed up, and he's playing a fish. Do you know what I mean? So I gave him a hand, obviously did photographs. He packs away that rod, off he goes, I jumps in there. I'm loving life now, and I'm thinking, wow, this is absolutely fantastic. You know, I'm on the fish and whatever. When we cut a long story short, that night I had my first fish, £33 common. Happy days, first session, I couldn't believe it, like, do you know what I mean? But yeah, so anyway, I'm like absolutely over the moon, do you know what I mean? So, but I'd noticed that morning there was a lot of fish showing up the other end of the lake, and I'm like, not loads and loads, but there was only one or two showing in sort of in the area of the lake that I was in. But at the other end, they were really seriously boshing out. So I thought, right, that's it. There was no one in a swim called Right Hand Willow, which is up by the car park end. So I whooped straight round there and lobbed out. My mate was fishing next door, Steve Honeywood. Exceptional angler, and he's the type of angler that can catch out of an empty bath. I mean, he's like, you know, he's that good, like, you know. But anyway, I hadn't seen him for a while. We chat, we had a bit of a social, do you know what I mean, etc. And anyway, that night, I chose to, and it's not something that I use all the time in my own personal fishing, but because there was sort of like, it was thick weed, but every now and again you could get a drop. But you know you're fishing over a week, because as soon as you sort of bring it in, it's like, it's not locked up, but you drag for a little bit and then it'd lock up. So it's sort of like there was clearish spots, like obviously where the weed's up to the surface and then it dips down and then comes back up again. I'm fishing in this dip down pad, and I thought, well, the only way I could really fish that, I'm not a big fan of trod rigs, even though I've used them, but I just felt that this wasn't the right scenario, place to be using it, and I wanted to be down in this dip, because, and using a chard, you know, if I wanted to fish on that spot, then effectively I'd be fishing across the top of it, you know, and I wanted to be right down there, or if my lead landed there, you know, my chod could be at the side of it, which is not good either. So I wanted to fish there. So anyway, solid bags was the way to go. I'm not the best solid bag angler in the world, and I'll confess to that, like, do you know what I mean? But if I need to use a solid bag, then I will. So anyway, I put this solid bag out, and got a lovely drop on it, a second rod, a lovely drop on it, and I thought, well, I'm fishing. And then about midnight, one of the rods rips off. I'm thinking, wow, here we go, plays it in, lovely jubbly. Anyway, it comes to the net, and I'm thinking, actually, this is a bit of a lumpy, yeah? Do you know what I mean? I'm thinking, wow, like, you know. So, and obviously, in this meantime, Steve's come from next door, and like, oh, do you want a hand? Like, and I said, yeah, absolutely, like, you know. So anyway, when I sort of like, I gave the rod to him, because I was in the water with my chesties on, because I had to land because of the weed in the margins. I rolled up the net, brought it out, and as soon as I unwrapped it, Steve had been on there for a couple of years, so he knew most of the fish in there. So I mean, even though they were commons, there were some ways they were quite distinctive, like, you know, with blemishes and stuff like that on the carp. And this particular one had a red spot. And this is the second fish, if you understand now, and it was a 39 pounder. And I'm sort of like, so anyway, and Steve recognised the fish, and he said, "Oh, no, that's normally a 40." Do you know what I mean? But you know, so I didn't actually get down there till July, beginning of July, so that the fish had already spawned. So obviously it was a spawned out 40 pounder, but I didn't care. I mean, I was like over the moon, like, do you know what I mean? It hadn't actually lost that much weight, because I think Steve said something was about 41-ish, 42, so it was only down a little bit, but you know, it didn't matter. I mean, that would have, the fish just blew me away. And they've got distinctive shape about them on farriers, like, you know, they've got like the small heads and really big wide shoulders. They're not all like that, but there's that distinctive shape about farriers fish. And then the following morning then, woof, off the rod goes again, and it's another 39 pounder. I'm like, I've got a brace of 39s here. This lake is just beyond a joke. I mean, I've just, in this session alone, I've had a 33, two 39s, and then later on, I think that it was the next day, I had a 27 pound common. So, you know, what a session. I mean, I've had 3 30s and an upper 20. I'm laughing, like, do you know what I mean? I've got some photos of those, which I'll ping up now. But you know, it wasn't long after this, and I was absolutely devastated. I'd slipped over, and I'd broken my leg, and I broke the tibia and fibula. And I couldn't go fishing. Absolutely devastated. I mean, for me, I mean, you know, it was 4 months in a cast, and I was totally gutted. I mean, you know, that winter was the mildest ever type of thing. I mean, fish were coming out left, right, and centre. And I was climbing the walls, like, I mean, very much like it is now with the coronavirus. I mean, we're all climbing the walls, we all want to get out. Well, I had no choice as well then. I mean, I couldn't get out. I mean, you know, you couldn't drive with a cast on my leg or anything, like, do you know what I mean? I was gutted, like, you know. So, and I knew even when I went back to fishing then, I couldn't really drive long distances because my leg was hurting. I mean, and I tried it. I mean, I tried it, but within about sort of 10-15 minutes, my leg was really hurting, like, you know. So it was basically back to fishing local waters for a little bit until I could, you know, my leg was strong enough. I mean, I notified the Carp Society of what had happened and stuff, and they were absolutely fantastic. And I didn't join the following year because my leg just wasn't strong enough. But the year after, I rejoined, and yeah, I was absolutely made up, and you know, just to get back on the water, I could push a barrel lovely and stuff like that. And you know, I was a little bit gutted because like a few of the members said, look, if you'd have come up here, we would have pushed the barrel round to whatever swim you wanted. But that's what it was like on Farriers. Farriers was like not an unusual water, but like people really looked after each other, and you know, you want someone to do photograph, they'd be there, and if they're a bit of a social, they'd be there, like, do you know what I mean? Not quite the same as on Horton, but it was really a good water to be on. Yeah, yeah, I was a little bit gutted about the old leg, but yeah, I mean, it is what it is. And literally, like I said, about a year and a half then, I just fished local waters and caught up with mates that I hadn't seen for a while. Because fishing up sort of like the Cotswolds, I sort of hadn't really kept in contact with a lot of my mates, so it was good to catch up with them guys. Like when I fished the local water, which is Lambie Lake, and yeah, it was all good. Like, and I fished like White Springs as well, which that's another story. Maybe I'll tell on another video. But yeah. So I was enjoying my fishing, sort of local, but I really was itching to get back, sort of like back up to the Cotswolds again. And when my ticket came back up again then, and I accepted it, obviously. Yeah, I went straight back up there, but I sort of, because I'd fished there for a couple of months, I sort of knew what to expect, so which was a good thing. I didn't have to do any background stuff, which is what I do on a lot of waters. When I fish a new water, I'll try and find as much information as I possibly can you know, about sort of the obvious things like stock and how weedy it is, how big it is, and you know, and stuff like that, like, do you know what I mean? But anyway, so when I turned back up on farriers then, I sort of knew, sort of like just in just a couple of months I was on there, that you know, previously, that I knew the type of spots that I wanted to be fishing on there. I didn't want to fish the spots that everyone else was fishing, because that was the problem. It was that people was, when I first went on there, people were sort of saying, oh, you need to go like 8 wraps there, 10 wraps there, 12 wraps there, and stuff like that. And yeah, that's all fine and dandy, but the problem being that I found was that those spots are fished in, year out, and you were only picking up, you know, you'd have bites off them, but not as many as I wanted, do you know what I mean? And I did sort of fall in that trap then. After I had that session, you know, I did fall into the trap of fishing the usual spots, which is and duly blanked. You know, and I was a little bit gutted, really. That I thought that because I'd started off so well that it would carry on, but it didn't. So when I had my second chance on the lake, I knew straight away that I was not going to fish those spots ever again. Do you know what I mean? Not unless I saw fish showing over them, then that would be different. Do you know what I mean? Because I do like to sort of, if fish are showing over the spot, then I'll normally put one rod there, you know, just for my own peace of mind, like, you know. But so when I went back there, then I was fishing totally different spots to what I was fishing beforehand, like, you know what I mean? You know, so I was fishing in weed. Do you know what I mean? It didn't bother me about fishing weed, you know, do you know what I mean? But I wasn't fishing solid bags, so basically all I was doing was sort of like using long hook lengths with a bit of foam on it, because I wasn't actually really that bothered about it. So if I was fishing over loose, low-lying weed, I wasn't really that bothered about if it was hooked up a little bit on a bit of weed and stuff like that. You know, if I was using a foam, it would literally come down and sit on, like with wafters or pop-ups, just have it so it comes down nice and slow. And it was near enough when I was first sort of found the Ronnie rig, and you know, and that particular rig was absolutely perfect for what I wanted, because I could have it so it really sank down lovely and slow, so using the foam would melt and ooh, lovely, and if it caught a little bit of weed on the way down, I wasn't actually that bothered, because I just think that, like, you know, if you have a look at a carp when it's blowing in and out, you know, their suction varies. I mean, it can be strong, it can be weak or whatever, but normally it's quite a strong sucking, and I just felt that when it's sucked in your hook bait, even if it was caught up on a little bit of weed or whatever, it would snap, because Canadian will snap quite easily, like doing it in your hand, and I just felt that that's what would happen. I mean, if it sucked it in, it would snap the weed and it would shoot back, and it did. I mean, it was absolutely devastating for me. I mean, one session I was on there, I was fishing a peg 31, I think it was, and same again. The usual spot was out there, a big clear spot, and it was absolutely fine. Do you know what I mean? You get the odd fish off that, like I said, but I didn't want to fish those spots, so I was fishing the near side of it, just into a little bit of low-lying weed. When people were coming around and sort of saying, oh, you're fishing this at so-and-so wraps or whatever, and I'd be like, yeah, that's what I'm fishing. Like, do you know what I mean? I wasn't. Do you know what I mean? Say, for instance, it was, oh, you're fishing a 12 wrap spot. Do you know what I mean? I'd be like, yeah, but I wasn't. I was fishing at about 10, which was in the weed, but not where the weed comes right up to the surface. It was the sort of like just down the other side, to the bottom of it, just as it came up thick. You know, it had to be accurate casting, but you know, this one particular session, I had like 8 fish in a session, in 48-hour session. And it was a bit bizarre, really, because I was fishing in next door initially in peg 32, and Jason, the bailiff, was fishing in 31, and he was having loads of liners. And then about midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, he said to me, he came into my swim, he said, I'm not feeling too good, because we'd had a takeaway, do you know what I mean? And delivered, and I think it was, we had an Indian or something or other, and he had a bit of a dodgy stomach with it, and he was sort of like, oh, are you feeling? I said, I'm fine, like, you know. So anyway, I think we think he had food poisoning, like, do you know what I mean? And so anyway, he packed up, And because in the morning, I left it till the morning, and then I moved into the swim because I hadn't had no liners, and Jason was getting a lot of liners. And I think actually he might have had one fish as well. I'm not quite sure, I can't remember now. But if he didn't have a fish, it was loads and loads of liners. So I jumped in there, because I still had 2 nights ahead of me. And cut long story short, I was there for the 48 hours, and I had 8 fish. I had a 40, 630s to 39.14, and an upper 20 as well. It was just an amazing session. I mean, I had one of the sort of known fish, which was Flo, one of the mirrors, and very few and far between, at like £36, and she was down in weight because it was that time of the year where they'd spawned. And yeah, so I had that braced up with 39.14. Do you know what I mean? Both had 2 runs at the same time, near enough. I mean, I landed there, put it in there, and then the other rod went. Do you know what I mean? It was just it was just one of those sessions, red letter sessions, like, you know what I mean? Absolutely fantastic times. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, Robo was the first angler that I'd seen on the lake. And as it happens, he was fishing sort of like opposite me a little bit. He was fishing on end point, and I was fishing peg 31, and he saw me sort of playing the first fish, and when it went in the net, he decided to reel his rods in then. Oh no, he phoned me up and said, "Oh, where you going?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know, it's in the net, I've only just landed it," like, do you know what I mean? So anyway, he came round to give me hands, but anyway, as I was sort of sorting that rod out, my other rod went, like, do you know what I mean? So I was playing that fish then, and luckily I always carry 2 nets around with me. So I landed that in the other net, so I got 2 fish, you know, in the nets. So you know, everything's kicking off. Robo came around, did the photograph of the first fish, which happened to be a 39.14 common. Quite a distinctive fish as well, like, do you know what I mean? A lovely light underbelly, sort of like a yellowy type of colour. Not quite a koi, but like it had that very similar type of markings. I'll put it up now, and you can make your mind up what you think of it. But and then after those photographs taken, we obviously took the other fish out of the water, and realised that it was Flo. I didn't realise at the time when I took it out. Robo had been on there for a few years, like, so we knew which fish were which. So when I put it on the mat, he straight away went, "Oh, that's Flo." So I was like, mate, I was blown away, like, do you know what I mean? £36, job done. I'm over the moon now. So anyway, you know, you can imagine now, you know, everything's. With myself, I'm quite sort of like, I either click with the water or I don't. Do you know what I mean? It's not sort of, never seems to be that in between with me, and this water I was clicking with. So I literally couldn't really do that much wrong, if I'm being honest. And also as well, it's sort of twice a year, because I work shifts, and I work 4 on 4 off. So when I book 4 days holiday, I get a 12-day break from work. Well, I won't go for 12 days, I normally go for 10 days, like, do you know what I mean? So I give myself a day at the beginning to get everything ready, and a day at the end so I can sort of get all my clothes washed and stuff like that when I come home ready for work. So I had one of these sessions then, not long after that session, and I went and I was fishing a swim called Slopies. Hadn't really done that much fish, but the fish that, if the word was getting caught from there, tend to be the decent fish. So that's why I jumped in, and I thought, well, you know, I've done, you know, even though I'd had a 40 from that swim and those 30s, that swim absolutely got stitched up then for weeks afterwards. But it never really did that amount of fish again. I think it was just like a one-off. It was the right time, right place to be in that particular swim. And I sort of found out quickly that the fish on there, they would move around really, really fast. I mean, if there was any pressure in a certain swim, they were gone. Do you know what I mean? I mean, literally within a couple of hours, sometimes a day, maybe 2, but they would go, and they wouldn't come back for a while. Then, like, do you know what I mean? So I was sort of, I always tried to stay on my toes and try and move on fish. You know, if you saw fish on there, you were in with a really good chance of catching one, like, do you know what I mean? Rather than sort of setting up camp and staying in the swim for 2 or 3 days and hoping for the best. You know, and I get itchy feet anyway, and I can't stay in the swim for too long. So anyway, we're fishing slopies, and I had a fish on the first morning, low 20, and I thought, well, that's fine. And then it was all quiet for the day, and then I had another one, another low 20, and I'm just thinking, well, I thought this swim was supposed to be doing big fish, but it wasn't for me. So, so anyway, I looked at my weather app, and I'm quite a big advocate of using the weather apps, you know, which way the wind's going, pressure and stuff like that, and even moon phases. I really do sort of like to say, like, you know, these are all factors that I use within my fishing. And I knew there was a full moon coming up the next day, and also the wind was going to switch around to a lovely southwesterly, which would be blowing into the swim near enough where I was fishing before 31, but 31 hadn't been doing fish, so I fished 32 next door, which was the swim I was in before I moved into 31, if you remember. So I went to 32, and I was using solid bags initially because it was a little bit weedy there, but I was getting absolutely mullered by the tench, and so I had to come off then, like, do you know what I mean? And I had to find a different spot, because even then, after I was just using single hook baits, I was still getting mullered by the tench, because I think that a lot of it seemed to attract that particular area with tench. And so anyway, I was fishing 8 wraps, and I went a little bit further. I went 10 wraps. I found another little spot, tight little spot. I could just about get 2 rods in there, and I'm waiting for this wind change to come in. A lovely spread, and when the wind came in, it was pumping in. I mean, you know, and we had rain all the way through the night. It was pumping. The wind was, and I'm like rubbing my hands together, thinking full moon, rain, wind. Oh, I'm right on purpose. But little did I know that because of the way the lake is, winds doesn't really affect it, but I didn't know that at the time. But anyway, that morning, literally, I'm sort of thinking, wow, like scratching my head, why haven't I caught a fish? Like, do you know what I mean? And as I thought it in my head, off went my rod. Boof. Struggling out, like, do you know what I mean? Because the wind's blowing in my face. I had it zipped up, and I'm trying to get out, and I got out there and slipped on my butt. When I got to, it was a bit of a slope before you got to like where my rods were, and whoop, straight down, hit the rod, and yeah, got it in, wherever. And then I trying to get my chest waders on. It was all it was just a comedy from start to finish. But I went into the water, and when I was landing the fish, this was coming up, this massive head come up to the surface, and it had like a flat head on it, but the head was massive. It was huge, and I'm just thinking, you know, even when it was coming into the net, and I'm just thinking, wow, this is a really big fish now, like, do you know what I mean? So it went into the net, literally sort of like, let's get it in there, brought it towards me, looked down, and my jaw just dropped, because I knew that was like my first, you know, sort of big fish. I mean, I'd had like low 40s, scraper 40s, 40s and 41s to this point, but hadn't had one of those bigger fish, you know, like the mid 40s that are in there. And when I looked down, and I thought, this is it, this is a mid 40. Do you know what I mean? My mate was fishing, as it happens, on little farriers. I gave him a buzz, and I said, look, you know, any chance to do photographs? Yeah, no worries. He came straight around, weighed it, 44.5 pound common. I'm blown away now. This fish is massive. So obviously we did the usual, do you know what I mean? Photographs on the bank, water shots and whatever, and I'll post up a pic of that now. Yeah, so anyway, I just literally slipped that big common back. I'm buzzing, do you know what I mean? I'd had a couple of fish beforehand, but this was the big one that I've wanted, like, do you know what I mean? And it was a proper gnarly old common. The top of his head looked like the moon crater. It was all dense, and it looked like a really old fish, like, do you know what I mean? It is an old fish. So anyway, it was as I was playing this fish, going back a little bit, was that I noticed whilst I was playing it, there was fish showing up the other end of the lake. I mean, and not just a couple of fish either. They were proper boshing out in front of swim 18. If you fish there, you'll know where that is. It's directly up the other end of the lake, furthest you can go. And I knew in my head straight away, even when that fish was coming over the net, I knew I was going to move. Do you know what I mean? So anyway, I photographs, put that back, and I'm starting to pack down. My mate's going, "Oh, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm moving." And "You've just had a fish." So, well, yeah, but they're up the other end now, like, do you know what I mean? So you went, "Oh, right, okay." So anyway, I moved up there, and I'd had 3 fish up until now, which I was really happy with. And then I moved up the other end, found a couple of spots I was really happy with, and it was the same again. I was fishing in the weed, low-lying weeds, no clear spots. Didn't want to fish clear spots, stay away from them, because I just felt that I get the odd bites, like I mentioned, but I wasn't going to get numbers of bites. So anyway, I found a couple of spots. My mate was fishing next door to me, because obviously after this while you tend, you meet new friends and whatever. And my mate was fishing next door, Gary, he's another Welsh fella, like, do you know what I mean? Lovely guy, like, do you know what I mean? And anyway, we were having a bit of a social, both off one of my rods goes. Brings it in, he does all the photographs. I think that was like mid-30, if I remember correctly. But I'd had a couple of fish then, and he was like basically sort of saying, "Oh, I'm just here to be a photographer." And I went, "Well, yeah, why not?" Because it was just mad, 'cause I just moved, and and as soon even when when you're setting up your gear and your new swim and you're watching the water and stuff like that, they were just like fizzing, like all like in a straight line. It was like, so it's when I just had like a little lead around. I didn't want to go nuts with it. I had a little lead around where they were fizzing to, and that was like, there seemed to be like a channel where right across the front of the swim, where the weed was a lot less than in front or behind. So so obviously they were using that as a bit of a patrol route and tipping down and feeding. So that's why I put 2 of my rods, like, do you know what I mean? But I spread them out a little bit, because the problem with what I was finding, because you're fishing weedy waters, if you fish two rods really close together, if you get a bite, more often than not, they'll pick up your other rods straight away, and it can be a nightmare. So I was fishing the sort of like either end of this channel, so there was a good sort of like 10 rod lengths between the two rods, which gave me a little bit of scope to I wasn't going to get picked up, and it was the best move that I ever did, to be honest. So so I was able to play the fish, bring them in, and yeah. And now anyway, carrying on with it with the rest of that session, I ended up with 10 fish altogether, including that 44.5 and another 40. I mean, from the new swim, and it was an absolute belter. That common was probably as good looking as the other one, because it was a slightly sort of different shape to that fish as well. It was like one of those ones where rather than being sort of like small head and long, sort of small head and big fat like dinner plate type commons, this one was like a long and more lean 40-pounder, and because of the length and it looked a lot bigger than what it was, but it wasn't. It literally was a scraper 40. I think it was like 40 pounds in ounces. So that was for me, this particular session now is turned out. When I had that session, I had 10 fish. The session before, I had 8 fish. Do you know what I mean? So it's like I was really sort of like, it was kicking off for me big time on there, like, I'm probably I did the 2 seasons on there, and I'm probably mingling the 2 seasons together now, if I'm being honest now, because there was like, I was having the odd fish here, there and everywhere, but the second season I did on there was obviously I knew a little bit more about the waters, but I also wanted to fish swims that were maybe sort of overlooked a little bit as well. and one of those swims was peg 12. Normally no one would fish peg 12 because they normally fish that because it's like at the end of a bay, and you've got peg 10 and peg 12 fish each other. No one fishes 11, which is right at the bottom of the bay, and it's a bit of a stalking one, so if the fish are there you can stalk them with one rod and it's great. But peg 10 and peg 12 face each other, but normally peg 12 you cast right over and fish from there. But the problem was at this moment in time was that peg 10 was really heavily weedy. Do you know what I mean? And it always, and it's another one of those swims on the lake that did big fish, and I don't know why. You could literally sort of near enough guarantee that the fish you would catch from there would be £30 plus. It wouldn't be any of the upper double male commons, which were all long and lean, and I'd had a couple of them throughout my time on there. But normally you caught the £30 plus, 30s and 40s rather than your doubles and your 20s, like, do you know what I mean? So anyway, I wanted to do something a little bit different than normal, which was sort of like sort of coming from peg 10 and casting over, because the amount of weed going from the far bank to you was just silly, and you would lose more than what you think. And I know that people were losing fish in that swim fishing from peg 10, where if I went on to peg 12 it was literally an underarm flick. It was literally, it was like a rod length, 2 rod lengths out, maybe 3 if you were going up the side of this bush. If you went past a little bit, it was about 3 rod lengths. But I sort of fished it about 2 rod lengths. It was literally, and it was like underarm, flick it out, and then put a handful of bait over the top, and it was that close I could actually put out like hemp and corn by hand. It was that close. Didn't even have to use a floating pole or nothing. Do you know what I mean? At that time I didn't have one, but if I'd have had a floating pole, probably might have got me a couple more fish. But this was like, it didn't matter. I mean, I didn't really need it. You know what I mean? And the bottom there, it was sort of like a gravel slope. And when you come down the bottom of this gravel slope, it was sort of like still gravel, but with a little dusting of silt. And the first morning I went into this particular swim, they were fizzing like hell right at the bottom of this. So obviously when I had a little head round, I found out. I had to make myself a bit of a cuppa then. When you see Laney doing his videos and he's having a drink, I'm just thinking, wow, he drinks a lot. But yeah, your mouth does get dry. And I don't know about you, I'm really bored of drinking beer now, so like coffee's fine for me now. But anyway, this particular swim on peg 12, I walked past it the one time, at that particular time, and I just saw a couple of bubbles, not like fizzing, but just like the odd 1 or 2 bubbles breaking the surface. But they were quite sort of random, but close enough together for me to think that there was not just one fish there was a couple of fish there. And I just think that there was like maybe air bubbles coming from their gills as they were sort of the gills were flaring up and pushing out bubbles up to the surface. There was just the odd bubble coming up, and I just had this really strong feeling, and a lot of my fishing goes on this, it's just instinct, and I just had a feeling there was a few fish there. But the problem was that the swim was really close to the water's edge, so I sort of tried to push my brolly as far back into the swim as I possibly could, and just literally not leave my brolly unless I had a bite or I was rebaiting. And first of all, I was using 2 rods. I was fishing one sort of like to this margin spot and one straight out, and it was about, I think it was about 12 wraps, I think, something like that off the top of my head. I think that was about it. It was about 12 wraps, 14 wraps straight out. But then the other one was like literally 2 rod lengths underarm swing, like I said. But I also, when I was watching the water, I noticed, because the weed was up to the surface, and the fish would actually come up the top of the weed, where the weed was about a foot or 2 below the surface, and then drop back down where the weed was lower. But where I had my line over there, they were coming up to the line, touching the line, and literally turning and going back out again. And I'm thinking, I'm losing a lot of fish here, because then I'm stopping them from coming into this bay. So I reeled that rod in. So and basically just used one rod, because I just felt that they wanted to get into this tree, and I was stopping them, effectively stopping them with a tight line as such going across the front of the swim. So I reeled that rod in, put that against the tree, and I thought, well, I can always sort of like have that ready to go. Do you know what I mean? So if I caught a fish, I could put it in the net and just literally lob it out. Even though it was close in, I just felt that, if that rod was there, then whilst I'm messing around having photographs, I could still effectively be fishing. So anyway, I'd found this lovely spot, and it was absolutely glorious, and I had a bit of depth to it as well. Like, even though it was close in, it was like, it was still about 4 or 5 foot. And I was like, oh god, yeah. And even when it hit the bottom, it would send up a plume of bubbles. So I knew it was quite gassy down there, but I knew it wasn't thick. It was sort of 2 or 3 inches of silt. And I was using a long hook length with a lovely slow sinking pop up, but I knew it was clear there. There wasn't any weed or anything. You had the odd bit of leaf molds and stuff like that, but I knew the fish were feeding there, or I thought they were feeding there. And I put a bit of bait out there. The next morning, I didn't have anything, and I was quite disappointed, really. And but when I sort of like popped my head out, like nice and stealth like, looked out, and literally all along this bush where I had my rig, it was really like fizzing up. I mean, there was patches, like there was 4 or 5 fish in there. There had to be, because there was so many fizzing patches everywhere. And I'm literally fishing 2 rod lengths, and I'm having liners. I just couldn't believe it, and I'm like really slacked off the line to try and keep everything, and I'm still getting liners, like, do you know what I mean? But I think it was because where I was putting it out by hand, some of it was dropping short and some of it was going further, so it was sort of spread in a line. So I think that they were sort of picking up my line sort of a foot this side of the lead, do you know what I mean? But I didn't particularly want to fish that close in, because where I was fishing, it just felt right. Do you know what I mean? The drop was nice. Where fishing a little bit closer, that silt had gone and it was more clear gravel, and I didn't want that, because I like the fact that the silt will conceal your end tackle a little bit better as well. So I put up with the liners, and then literally as I'm doing that, a fish came right underneath my rod tips. I was like, oh my god, like, it wasn't a big fish. Do you know what I mean? It was like an upper 20, maybe a low 30. Come across and I'm saying it's not a big fish, but it is in relative terms. But it came underneath my and went off to my right, and I thought, well, that's probably what it was. If these fish are coming out from the bush and going through my line, and nowhere near my rig as such, like, do you know what I mean? So anyway, I thought, right. So nothing happened that day. And I was a little bit slightly disappointed, really, because with the amount of action that I was getting in the swim. So I was trying to think of different ways that I could sort of like turn this around in my favour. So what I did then, I literally used like overglugged sort of like wafters. So they weren't quite, they weren't wafted as such, do you know what I mean? They were sort of like a hardened bottom bait with a little bit of buoyancy to it, do you know what I mean? And what I did was just put a little, sort of like a little tiny side stopper of a piece of fake corn. Put that on top of it, just for a little bit of visual. And what I did then, I had a tin of corn meal and just literally put out like 10 grains of corn on top of the hemp mix and the boilie mix that I was already putting out there, like, do you know what I mean? So I was just to break it up a little bit and try and see if I could nick a bite, like, you know. That night, midnight, rod goes off, do you know what I mean? Boof, off it goes. Playing it in, and I got it in, do you know what I mean? But because it had this shelf, it was awkward. I had to go out the water to land the fish, and it was nearly the spot that I was fishing, type of thing. I had to land it from, like, you know. But I'd done it. And my mate was fishing in Peg 8, Ross Partridge, really good mate of mine. I've known him for years, like, do you know what I mean? He came round, did the photographs. To me, it was a 40-pounder. I'm buzzing now. My first fish on at the swim's a 40-pounder. He's like, oh my god, like, you look at the size of that, like, you know, and I put it back and stuff like that. But anyway, in the morning then, it was just getting light, and the same, you know, obviously the rod went off again. And I'm just thinking, wow, like, you know. But it was like really weird because like the bobbin hit the top, then went back down, hit the top, went back down, and it was sort of like, oh, it's another line there. And then it sort of hit the top and just stayed there. It didn't take any line or didn't do anything. And so I got it there, and it felt like a tension. I was just, oh Christ. And because it wasn't light then, do you know what I mean? I sort of like skimmed it in, because it was like, I thought, oh, it's a tent, I'll just skim it in the net, like, you know. So I skimmed it in the net, switched my head torch on. It was only like 10 minutes, 15 minutes before it got light. Skimmed it in, and it was a 40 pounder. I'd literally skimmed a 40 pounder. Right, a bit of a weird ending. I did do another ending, but there was just so much noise background that it just sounded awful. But I didn't realise until I put all the camera stuff away. So I'm now having to do this on my phone. So just to finish the video off, really. Yeah. So basically, after I'd had that session, I caught that 40. I had a couple of more fish. Ended up with about 5 fish in the end, and yeah, and to be honest, it was just a good session, really, to finish up my time on Fallius, because I knew my time was up. I'd done my 2 years, didn't really want to spend another year on there, if I'm being honest, and I just felt that I needed to move on. So I'll leave it like that anyway. I've got plenty of footage. I didn't do any footage on this one because I had more stills than video. I didn't really have any video footage of me fishing, but I'm sort of toying with the idea of maybe doing something for when I was on Horton and other waters bit closer that I've got video footage for, and I can maybe incorporate that into another, like a video blog thing, this type of thing. But I'm not quite sure whether or not this particular type of video works. So guys, it's just down to you. I mean, do you want to see another video? I'm not sure. I don't know whether you want to see another one from me or whether you don't. Just comment below, and if enough positive vibes come out of this, then yeah, I'll certainly do another one. Like, do you know what I mean? But yeah, I'll just leave it in your hands. I mean, if you want me to do another one, I will. If you don't, then I won't bother. Do you know what I mean? But I'm just trying to do this just to break up my own sort of corona sort of lockdown thing, and if I can give enjoyment to somebody else, then it's absolutely fine as well. That's great. Like, do you know what I mean? But if you want to see some more stories of what I've been doing in my own fishing, then, you know, say yes or no or whatever. Okay, just stay safe, and hopefully we'll see each other on the bank pretty soon.